I'll do a quick run through on the agenda, and then before we get to any real details, okay, guys? Today we will talk. Well, we'll give our introductions, of course, and then we'll talk about the important things, and then we'll do a Q&A. Are we really ready to go? Awesome. So, who we are. We have Charles Mangan, an independent Mac management consultant, automation specialist, vintage computing aficionado, and a self-aware collection of bash scripts. And with us, we also have the illustrious Tom Bridge from JumpCloud, Principal Product Manager over here. And I'm Pam Lefkowitz. I'm your host for the day. I'll ask the questions, I'll grill the people, we'll talk about things, they'll answer questions. Tom, do you want to do a quick what you do around here?
Oh, sure. So, hi, everybody. I'm Tom Bridge. I'm the Principal Product Manager for Apple Technologies here at JumpCloud, which means I work on our mobile device management platform for macOS and iOS, as well as on our agent platform for macOS. And I spend most of my days working with our development teams to make sure that they have all of the necessary information they need to build what we're trying to build here at JumpCloud.
Awesome. Thanks. Charles, you want to do a quick who you are and say hi?
Sure. I'm Charles Mangan. That's a hard G, like Jif. And Pam already stole my other joke, which was that I'm just a collection of bash scripts in a trench coat. But yes, as you said, I am a Mac management consultant, automation and vintage computing enthusiast, as well as video game enthusiast. And Tom and I are going to talk after about arcade games some more.
Awesome. So let's dive right in, huh? We're going to talk about some new Ventura features today.
Yeah, we're super excited. You know, macOS Ventura comes out on Monday, October 24th. I would expect it around the middle of the day. Traditionally, I think it's 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern is when we start to see the updates start to flow out of the Apple CDNs there, and your systems will start to report, if they don't have a major delay, that macOS Ventura will be ready for you. That's macOS 13, lucky number 13. And we're going to dive into, a bunch of things. I think the biggest thing to recognize as part of the, Ventura update is what it can run on. The list this year is a little bit different. It's actually, after a couple of years in a row that didn't remove eligibility from any major macOS, or excuse me, from any Mac device. We've got a pretty wide spread of systems here that are not supported this year. The dividing line tends to be somewhere between 2017 and 2018, with the notable exception of the venerable 2013 Mac Pro is no longer supported. And so there it is, the 2019 and later version of the Mac Pro. That's the big chonky tower with the awesome air holes. So if you have any cylinder Mac Pros in your environment, you can bid them adieu. They will only run Mac OS Monterey and before. On the desktop front of the iMac and the iMac Pro, it's 2017 and forward that will run macOS Ventura. On the laptop front, it is on the MacBook Air, it's a 2018 MacBook Air and later. On the MacBook Pro, it's the 2017 MacBook Pro and later. The original 27-inch, the original 2017 12-inch MacBook will be running macOS Ventura, but not anything prior to that. So the Mac Studio obviously supported, but it'll say Mac Studio 2022, but because there's only one. So don't freak out when you see 2022 or later. That's just the most recent version and the only version of that product to date. And that kind of takes us through our unsupported systems. I mean, one of the things, Charles, that we've talked about, here is that what kind of things are we seeing in our testing? How well is this going to work on 8 gig systems? And that was one of the questions that you put in there. Do you have any thoughts here in terms of maybe minimum requirements that aren't part of the requirements?
Myself, I haven't really delved into it too much with, pushing the boundaries on even on Monterey. I haven't done a lot of sort of high performance kind of stuff, video editing, that sort of stuff myself, and the last several years. That being said, I think a lot of the work that Apple's been doing in the last few revisions of macOS has been to sort of minimize the footprint on some of those systems that did ship with 8 gigs. And I don't know how much is bound to the the processor or the memory anymore, with so much being pushed to things like the GPUs and spread out to multiple cores and all those systems. And I think the oldest system that you've got on the supported list is from 2017. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. There are still a few of those that are 8 gig. So I was going to say it might be time, and now at 5 years out, to maybe consider a retirement policy for those systems.
Yeah. In some ways, it's not so much bound to the 8 gigs as how fast is the SSD. I'm actually struggling in the background right now to reinstall Monterey on my iMac that has a Fusion drive, and the advice is, well, if it's got spinning metal in it, probably time to retire it, regardless of its age, just because APFS works so much better on the SSDs. And if you've got a system that only has 8 gigs of wired in memory and you can't upgrade it because they haven't been doing that for 5 or 6 generations of Macs now anyway, is the SSD big enough to use as that constant caching if you're if you're using up that memory? So I think I would look at the speed and the size of your SSD on some of those systems that have 8 gigs, as opposed to just drawing a hard line at it needs 16 gigs or more, at least for now, unless something changes where you really are pushing that boundary.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Good insights. Let's go talk about system settings a little bit.
I was going to say, Sad Panda, the the system preferences app that has been part of macOS 10. If we think about this going all the way back to 2000, today we get to put to rest, or excuse me, Monday we get to put to rest the system preferences application, which is no longer present on macOS 13 Ventura. It will be replaced by system settings, which looks an awful lot like the settings app on your iOS or your iPad OS device. There are a lot of new locations for individual settings. You may have to do some documentation updates here for within your organization to get ready for macOS Ventura. I would strongly encourage folks to, if you have not yet, join the Appleseed for IT program. Joining the Appleseed for IT program is the best way to be aware of what's happening as an IT admin, and you can join with any managed Apple ID. You don't need to be invited. You can just go to appleseed.apple.com and sign in there with any managed Apple ID. And you'll be part of the Appleseed for IT program, which is a great way to preview macOS releases, test them within your organizations, test them in production if even, and make sure that you've got everything ready to go for the new versions. So the new version of system settings looks an awful lot like our looks an awful lot like an iOS or an iPadOS app, where it's divided into 2 columns. It's meant for changeability in that regard. What's really nice is that you can finally resize the window, which is new and different for the system preferences app, and I'm looking forward to being able to change that size and move things around. I also really like the search function that's contained herein. You will also note that there that you can manage it with a profile, kind of. I think I will be very clear and point out that Apple's documentation, which is available on their developer website, indicates that the system preferences MDM profile, which allows you to limit access to individual system preferences panes, has been deprecated as of macOS Ventura. And so if you are restricting certain areas of system preferences in your macOS environments today, you will want to test whether or not those restrictions still apply successfully in macOS 13. And you're going to want to check to see if there's any kind of changes that you can make there. Apple is obviously an organization that listens to its customers and listens to customer feedback. If you've got a real need to block access to individual software update, or excuse me, individual system preferences panes in your current environment today and want to do the same going forward, supplying Apple with information about what you're trying to prevent from happening, whether or not it's handled through a system preferences pane, is super valuable to their environment. And I strongly encourage people to go about that process. So taking steps forward here, you're going to want to have a better plan other than just blocking access to individual system preferences panes, because that may be a little less possible in the macOS 13 future.
This is going to be really interesting for environments that have many different OSs in it. Because let's
Agreed.
be honest,
Yep.
they do.
Which is most of them, right?
Yeah. Well,
And if you were using, hiding a specific preference pane as a way to prevent your users from being able to modify a preference, there are better ways to do that generally. You can, lock those with a profile as say this setting is not writable, whereas just blocking the preference panel doesn't necessarily do that. So there are better ways to manage that. Look into that now, even if you're not going to be rolling out Ventura for a little while, because hopefully if the that sort of continuity of those P lists and things that manage those specific settings continue from 12 to 13, then you won't have to send out a different set of profiles for the Ventura users once they upgrade. And as for system preferences and updating all of your screenshots and documentation and stuff, I had finally just gotten around to stopping calling it, the control panel and the chooser. So
no more desk accessories for you, Charles. Regrets.
oh, you guys. Gatekeeper.
Gatekeeper gets some really fun updates here. I think that, the initial response from a lot of people is, oh my God, everything's different. Well, no, it's not. It's the same Gatekeeper process that we know and love. Gatekeeper on macOS has long been part of the security story, and it makes sure that the code that runs on your system is code that is properly signed as of, a couple years ago, notarized, which means Apple's got a copy on file that they have stamped, that certain requirements have been met with regards to the hardened runtime and other security standards. And, we have seen a lot of, opportunity here to make some accountability required of our developer community. And, as much as it's been a pain in the behind, for users who are maybe trying to run unsigned code. I mean, not that M1 machines run unsigned code, but that's neither here nor there. It's certainly a part of the admin landscape that we are familiar with, that we understand what the quarantine bit is for, that we understand the value of having a common signing authority that makes sure that your software is safe, or if that it's proven unsafe eventually, you can safely rip that out as the operating system, not necessarily just as the admin environment. So there are some major changes here to Gatekeeper's operation, and I'll refer everyone to Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference videos, which they put out every year. There are some really great updates to Gatekeeper in macOS 13. Specifically, these have to do with software updates. So that if you are, an application on disk, you can make sure that the only way to update your application is your own update process. So that if you're a piece of software, say com.jumpcloud. Darwin-agent, which is the name of the JumpCloud agent, right, on disk, you can make sure that only the same signing ID can update that, binary, which makes it secure to, keep your software update processes in the family. This does cause complications for individual applications that are being updated by a third-party process. For example, I always think of the amazing open source project Monkey, which operates as a signed binary. Don't expect that it doesn't do that. It's definitely part of a signed set of tools. But you're going to need to extend some application permissions that are brand new as part of this. And I'll point everybody again at Apple's great developer documentation, which calls out a brand new privacy service as part of the privacy preferences policy control section. And it's called System Update App Bundles, or System Policy App Bundles. That's right, SPAB. System Policy App Bundles, which will allow a given Code signing identifier, you're familiar with those long blocks of code that come out of code sign space dash dr space dash and then the path to the application. That's going to give you all of the signing certificate information for a given application binary. If you specify that that right applies to that application tool, then you're going to be able to update those apps. So be ready, but you're not going to want to apply that to a macOS 12 system in preparation for upgrade. You're only going to want to apply that preference to a macOS 13 device. macOS 12 will look at that key and say, huh, and then throw it out. It won't understand how to deal with that particular tool. It won't understand how to deal with that environment when the update is complete. You should only apply those updates or those policies to macOS 13 devices, or be in a state where after an upgrade, it's applied to that system again.
Yeah, the backward compatibility for new keys is kind of mixed sometimes with a new policy or a new profile that has a mix of things that are 12 and 13 in them, and sometimes that profile will just get rejected because it has things that are invalid, and at other times it just has those are ignored until the system basically understands what it is when you upgrade. But it's not super clear as the one who's writing those profiles or who's distributing them, what's going to happen on a system that's older. So a lot of times you'll have the strategy is here's the profile for Monterey systems, here's the profile for Ventura systems, and so that complicates things a little bit. Unfortunately, it's Apple's priority is not necessarily making the Mac admins' life easier. They're adding new features. They're focused on improving the user experience, and to them that also includes keeping the bad guys from controlling your Mac. If it also happens to make it more difficult for the legitimate admin to take over and control your Mac, well, then it's working as designed, and you just have to trust that the Mac admins in the world are going to figure out which hoops to jump through, and Apple's going to only allow the legitimate people that have the right signing certificate and the right notarization and all that to get through those hoops. And so that's it makes our lives a little bit harder, but it does make the user experience ultimately better, and that's really where Apple's priority lies.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Charles, would you like to talk about lockdown mode?
Sure. Lockdown mode's interesting to me, mostly because not for myself, but because I have worked with people that are maybe not like super high priority targets, but they're paranoid enough to think that they are, or if they're traveling overseas or traveling into a off the grid sort of a situation where they're not necessarily going to be in constant contact with the management infrastructure, or that's helping to keep them safe, or their personal assistants that are actually handling their phones. They're having to do it for themselves. So the lockdown mode for those that haven't already read through the docs, basically it seems like a move for and they specifically call out journalists, people who might be targeted by a government or a government sponsored agency to be on a watch list or whatever. And I can still also see recommending this for, like I said, the C-level, the CEO, the CXOs of the world, executives who you think might qualify as a potential target for that like spear phishing attack. Lockdown should prevent changes to or new profiles being added onto a device once it's enabled. It's an additional measure that prevents people from surreptitiously sending you an enrollment or a certificate or a profile to install on the device and adding some bogus profile that gives the attacker that MDM level access to the phone. At the same time, be aware, it also means that there's no MDM infrastructure for handling it, so you can't enable or disable it via a legitimate MDM once it's turned on, which is kind of the point. Once the device's owner says this is in lockdown mode, they're not going to be able to add in a new VPN or a new certificate to allow them onto a different management system. And it's going to obviously take some user training on the part of the admins to say, once you turn this on, don't trust anyone who tells you, okay, in order to do this or install this software or whatever, you need to turn off lockdown mode. You can't sign on to the Wi-Fi here unless you turn off lockdown mode. That's a red flag.
Oh yeah. I mean, no doubt. Now, I don't want to get people afraid here and say that if their CEO turns on lockdown mode on their own, that your MDM will stop working, because that is not the case. Your mobile device management solution, once it's on the device, is still in charge of that device, despite or in charge of, or excuse me, I'm having trouble with words today, despite or because of the lockdown mode as a whole. Lockdown mode is really meant for parties that are having, that are under additional threat. I used to work with a couple of folks in international finance who are in charge of the, the sanctions regimes, here in the United States, and they were under constant assault. And so they were on hardware tokens for their email address. They were on, all manner of things. This is for those people. And so if you've got real, concerns about your safety, if someone were to gain access to your device, I would strongly encourage you to turn this on. But as Charles mentioned, there's no on-off switch for this in MDM. And more than that, you can't even know if a device is currently in lockdown mode if you're the MDM. So just be aware of that. That's something that, if you're concerned that you want to know whose devices are in lockdown mode currently, that's a great place for, some feedback to Apple, that they might want to hear about that. So if you wanted to know whose device was in lockdown mode, that would be a valuable thing to provide through the feedback channel.
Yeah. Ideally, you would know who those targets are, who those people are that would be potential users, and you would be the one that would recommend against them doing that. But ultimately, if they're holding the phone, they are the owner of the phone or of the Mac or the iPad or whatever. They can turn it on and off only at that point. They're still on your MDM. They're still being managed, as I said, or as Tom said. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. It just means that you can't push through MDM to turn it off.
Yeah, that's correct. And so the other interesting thing is that what this actually changes on device isn't just the profiles that are suddenly missing, or the ability to add profiles are not two things. Some attachments in iMessage will not show up. They will be, you'll have to download them into the Files app and launch them that way. And those include PDFs and graphics. So if you were expecting a deep link into the preview of a PDF, you're not going to get it. It also turns off shared photo libraries as part of iCloud, so that if you're in a shared photo library for your family, you're not going to see those photos on the device that's in lockdown mode. Those are just vectors that Apple has decided are not available to iOS at that time. So those are two of the major features. Strongly encourage folks to take a look at Apple's documentation on this subject, on this as well as on Safety Check.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. And other changes. Internet access required in Setup Assistant.
Yeah. Just really quickly, the internet access requirement could be bypassed if you were even if you were enrolling a device, or if you had an enrolled device, because your network might not be working, or Apple's network might be offline, or they might be in the middle of an AWS or a Google DNS or whatever storm where things are just broken all over the internet. So now the only difference is you can't bypass that on any device. So it's more like an iPad or an iPhone, where I guess more like a phone now, where the only way to actually turn it into a usable device when you take it out of the box is to connect to something and activate it. So it's more like a phone in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Great. How about Migration Assistant?
Oh, I'm excited for this one. This is a great. this is another one of those, yay, finally. For a long time, MDMs were a source of strife during Migration Assistant. And if you wanted to migrate an identity from one system to another, you would try and take the old MDM profile with it. Now the system is smart enough to say, this is a device that is under automated device enrollment. And so, under that circumstance, it will allow you to migrate the user data and the application data, but not the system settings. It's now MDM aware. This is a huge moment for Mac admins. You'll be able to do a lot more here in terms of making Migration Assistant a smooth experience for MDM enrolled systems. So that is super awesome.
Yeah, with the caveat that hopefully it works better than Migration Assistant currently works, which there is a non-zero possibility that you'll get halfway through it and then it'll just stop, or it will say, I can't move, I can't transfer this certain data or this kind of this application or whatever, and you're just stuck. So hopefully it's.
I must have just been really lucky, because
I have too, but whenever I've done it for somebody else, I've almost always ended up just doing an rsync or something down to a volume and then back up again for all their user data. And I've always separated the user data from the system data that way. So now it's just more of an automated thing from the Apple side, directed from Apple.
I also generally like to say about Migration Assistant that 60% of the time it works every time.
Yeah.
Tom, you want to talk real quick about Ventura?
I sure do. We're very excited about the release of macOS Ventura. We think that there's a lot in this release that is going to be amazing. I think that there's a lot of information that's going to be coming out soon regarding what this new operating system brings to us in terms of additional profiles, additional policies, all sorts of great things, and it really sets the table for a great year of development against these new features. So here at JumpCloud, we're incredibly excited about the release on Monday. I'm happy to say that we will support macOS Ventura when it is released. Our agent worked great. Our login window works great. Our update mechanisms are all locked in place. We're super excited about getting this out into the hands of our end users who want to upgrade on day zero. We're not going to be your blocker here. And there's a bunch of other profiles and stuff that we'll be able to talk a little bit more about once the new operating system is released next week. For organizations that maybe aren't ready for macOS Ventura, there is a new policy in JumpCloud now today that is the major OS upgrade delay policy. That major OS upgrade delay policy will work on macOS 11 and 12. It will essentially say, macOS 10, 15 and later even. It will essentially say, hey, no new major versions of the operating system for now, up to 90 days. So if you're not ready on day one, and that's okay, not everybody's ready on day zero, you can put a delay policy in place. And there's a second policy this year. The second policy looks a lot like previous year's policies because it blocks the application installer. We'll have a lot more to say about application installers and Delta updates and other things along those lines later this month.
Awesome. I want to remind everybody to put your questions into the chat. We will leave, 10 or 15 minutes at the end. Comments, questions, nice things, say nice things.
Say mean things too. We just want to answer your question.
You could. Just make a question. All right.
You can comment on Tom's commentary on testing in production.
Yes.
That would be.
I don't always test my code, but when I do, I test it in prod.
That's right. So we've got a few slides on iOS 16. We may or may not go into as much detail as Ventura. Let's see where we go. Hardware support.
Hardware support. Yeah, I was going to say not every iOS device, gets iOS 16. We are mostly up to I believe it's the iPhone 8 and the iPhone SE are the oldest two devices that support iOS 16. Pretty long run. So I was going to say phones from the past 5 or 6 years will work with iOS 16. So maybe this is a sad time for us to say the original iPhone SE gets to go away. or the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 6 are finally out of our environment. So we can, wish them well, retire them to our desk drawers, give them to small children. These are all things that you are available to do. But maybe, it's going to say having a good upgrade policy available to you that's going to, keep you on a more recent version of the operating system is going to be awesome.
Right.
This one I love.
Me
I was going to
too.
say I have made a couple of lock screens that I love, and I've tied them to. You can do some really cool things. So I'm going to show my phone here. This is a photo I took at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and at Disney, and you can see I've got my Do Not Disturb set. I've got the font custom. I've got a bunch of of widgets missing from this one. But it's really just a place where you get to decide what goes on your home screen, whether or not you want up to 4 widgets from apps that will tell you the weather or your calendar appointments or this battery status on your AirPods Max. You've got all sorts of options there. And it's a great experience for end users to really feel like their device is theirs. I've generally found in my IT career when a user considers their device to be theirs, at least on some level, they take better care of it. And so allowing end users to customize their lock screen is a big deal. There are 6 different fonts. There are a ton of different templates for this. There's a really great, a face that you can put on here for, portraits. So for example, I have a face that has my son. You'll love the Cubs hat there, Pam.
Love that.
But it's got a lot of different things on there. And you can tie an individual lock screen. I, for example, have one that's set up for driving mode so that I know what the weather is. And so, there it gives you the lock screen changes based on what the weather is going to be and predicted to be. And so there I can tell you what the air quality is, what the sun, what the weather is for the day. It's super cool. There are a lot of really great options for that and for different kind of, emoji backgrounds, which are a lot of fun. And so there's a lot of really great functionality that's tied up in the new lock screen customization. And of course, for those end users with iPhone 14 Pro devices, the lock screen is of course now always on. And so you can always see that something's going on your device, which is kind of cool and gives you those back, those things there. So lots of good stuff there.
Pretty clear what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the day after this webinar.
Yes,
it's the new.
I'll be writing.
Yeah, you're going through and customizing that like you would with your the emojis when they first came out.
Oh yeah, I still do that.
One thing that is worth mentioning to this audience is that it doesn't look like the lock screen customizations or those settings can be set or locked by an organization for things like, turning off the always on screen to preserve battery, or, this phone belongs to whatever org, or branding the lock screen so it has, the company logo on it. So, that's the work phone as opposed to your personal phone. Does that seems like that's something that is either not yet implemented or Apple just doesn't see that as a thing?
Yeah, I just don't think we've got the detail on that yet. And so, if this is something you want to restrict in your organization, definitely file feedback and give Apple the information that they need and the reasoning that you've got, as well as how many devices you have to make good decisions here.
Yeah, I mean, even just going back to the lockdown mode discussion, just the privacy of, you misplace your phone and it has a picture of your family on it. That's not necessarily the best thing for, security and privacy concerns. So if it's, especially if it's, company or corporate owned, whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
iMessage.
I can't tell you how many times I've used this already. iOS 16 obviously dropped in September, and we get an edit button finally. Finally, we get an edit button. I judging by my typing and my typo histories, Justice X, has anybody ever typed that into their phone by accident? Because the C and the X are right next to each other, and autocorrect is like, I don't know. So I was going to say the number of times that maybe a Siri correction has gone awry, and that is definitely a welcome thing to see. People on the most recent version of the operating system that supports this, that'll be macOS Ventura and iOS 16, will see the message update, and it will show you a little edited tag on the bottom of the message. people on older versions of the operating system will just get a new copy of that message. So, the behavior is pretty clear. It's not going to let you, totally delete a message, and essentially it will let you delete a message, but the other side will know that you have deleted a message from your iChat history. So be aware.
Do we know how retrievable those are from the carrier?
I don't at this point. My expectation is that those are probably struck from the device on both sides and struck from the backup. You'll see that a message had been sent, but I don't know what the recoverability here is. iOS 16 has not been out long enough for us to really have updates to the forensics tools that will give us that option. But I'm sure that someone out there is definitely studying the changes that have been made to iMessage and how they appear on device.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Smart cards.
Oh man, this one made me so happy for a couple of different people in my life, because I live here in Washington D.C. and here in Washington D.C. where there's a very large 5-sided building, and that very large 5-sided building has a lot of people who work with very secure email, all of which require these lovely smart cards. And macOS devices have had great support for smart card for a number of years. iOS devices never have. And so this year, as part of iOS 16 and eventually iPadOS 16.1, which will drop later this fall, I think on Monday also, we get support for smart cards on those devices, which means secure, truly secure certificate-based authentication based on a second factor with a smart card and a PIN is something that is coming to iOS and iPadOS. For those folks in your life who have that ability or who need that ability, there is now support for card readers that go along with iOS that will have direct access to your CAC or PIV card. And so you type in your PIN, the certificates are unlocked, you can access your email. And so that's just going to be a game changer for so many people who want to use their still insanely secure iOS devices with their with their corporate or government mail.
Right, and it's a recognized standard more so than the face unlock. If I'm signing into a secure app or something, and using Face ID or whatever is fine. But in various buildings of various shapes, you may not even have access to a camera on your phone. May that be locked down for whatever reason. I would recommend that if you're the one that's in charge of acquiring those readers, that you make sure you're getting legitimate ones and not ones that are sketchy with hacked firmware, like certain government agencies might have found out to their chagrin.
If I can just give a quick shout out to Tim Perfit of Two Canoes Software. Tim is an amazing developer and has some solutions for this. So go check out Two Canoes, TWOcanoes.com, and he's got some good stuff for you.
Absolutely. Hey, sorry, it's in the wrong place. Life-saving. Life-saving.
Yeah, I was going to say, anytime you go out deep into the woods, and at JumpCloud, we're based in Colorado. I'm based in DC, but a lot of our folks out there go out to the mountains. And you go out someplace that maybe doesn't have the greatest cell coverage, or maybe doesn't have cell coverage at all. You wouldn't be able to call for help in those cases. And so now with the new iPhone 14 Pro and 14, I believe it's on both devices. I'll check that after the webinar. Sorry, everybody. There is an option there to use satellite coverage based on geostationary satellites, 800 miles in the air, get a message to rescuers. With your location and your emergency data. My understanding is that when you invoke this feature, and this will be available later this year, it will run you through a quick guide that basically says how many people are you with, where are you, what's your emergency, what's your situation, how much supplies do you have, those kind of things. And then it turns that message into a very tightly compressed message that can then go to the satellite signal and back. And so essentially you will be able to call for help. It can take a couple minutes for those messages to send out under cloud cover or under tree cover. But if you're out in the clear blue sky, all alone in a field, you can get those messages still out in under a minute. And response is obviously based on whatever things are going to happen. But I think that is certainly a very welcome development. I'm excited for this. You'll also be able to send your location with Find My to Find My Friends through your satellite solution this way, which is kind of neat.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah,
I suppose we should have put a slide in there for crash detection.
Oh yeah. I was going to say, because that's the other big emergency feature that's in iOS 16 that works on all of your phones. It's going to detect if you get into an auto accident. We've had fall detection on the watch for a while, and it's actually come in handy for some people I know. I've had it go off too when I took a spill, and I was thankfully able to answer the question. Yeah, I'm okay. But those kind of change. Being able to summon emergency help when it matters most, when you can't do it on its own, is really helpful. Just don't be an amusement park with your phone, because it will see the roller coaster as an accident. This has been a story recently that phones at Cedar Point have been, going off on some of the rides when treated as a crash. So be aware.
When your phone senses that you're in free fall and then sudden high G situation, that is a marker of either you have been thrown from a vehicle or your phone has been thrown from a vehicle, and that's that'll trigger it. The emergency stuff is obviously highly important, but I think most people are going to be exposed to it through the share my location via satellite, only if not most people, but more likely and hopefully more likely than having to call for emergency services. Just being able to share your location when you're out in the woods and say, I've reached base camp. I'm going to send this note to, I'm out sailing and I've reached a certain point today. I'll send my location so my family knows, okay, he made it this far on this, off the grid sabbatical. This is where he is today, that kind of thing.
Let's talk a little bit about cross-platform features. Folks, put your questions into the chat.
We've got a bunch of great ones at this point, so keep them coming.
Nice. Continuity camera.
Oh, this one's so exciting, and I cannot wait. I've got a package out for delivery today. It's got the new Belkin, MagSafe, adapter for the back of your phone. The idea here is that you have an amazing webcam, but it's right here in your pocket. The amazing webcam on your computer maybe isn't so amazing. Apple has definitely not gotten high marks for the built-in cameras on their MacBook line of computers. I'm using the camera on the brand new the Studio display. But I would much rather be using the much better camera that's on the back of my iPhone Pro 14. And now you'll have the ability to, on devices that are signed into the same Apple ID on your phone as on your machine, use this as your webcam just directly in the system. It will essentially do this all through handoff and continuity, which is Apple's ability to pass data back and forth between iOS devices and their macOS partners that are signed into the same Apple ID. This technology does require iCloud keychain to be available for your Apple ID. So anybody with a managed Apple ID, like maybe I have it here at work at JumpCloud, won't be able to use this feature. But anybody who is using their own personal Apple ID on a Mac and on an iPhone will be able to link the two without having to connect the two with a cord or use a special app on their device, which is traditionally how this has been done. I think there are a couple of different, it was an Ecamm Studio app, as well as things like Camo and other tools like that have used your iPhone camera, have required direct connectivity. This now does it over the wireless.
So exciting. Such a sweet feature.
Oh yeah, and it also will support using the wide angle camera as it will allow, when you mount the camera up on your screen, it will essentially look down at your hands. And Pam, I know you're a crafter of some renown, if I remember correctly. This is all kinds of exciting opportunities for crafters, because you'll be able to see what the work is being done on their desk.
Absolutely. Yeah. Instructors are going to love this. Art instructors, fiber instructors, and anybody who has to show their hands in an instruction situation. It's going to be magic.
I just wish that Apple had a checkbox to require that the phone be on some kind of stand or mount.
Yes.
Because I
I've
can
had
only
it,
imagine the Zoom meetings or the the webinars where we're going to do a walk and talk, and it's just it's making me dizzy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're gonna if you have a user that really wants to do this on their phone, give them a stand, give them a little tripod with a phone mount on it so that they can use that.
Yep.
Let's do a
Not make everyone nauseous.
quick stage manager. We've got a couple more slides. I want to make sure we have time for questions.
Absolutely. So Stage Manager is a new, desktop management routine that is available for your macOS and iPadOS devices. And it's a way of grouping windows into stages. And so you can essentially have a stage. I have a stage up right now on this workstation that is my GoToWebinar on this display and my browser on the left window. I can switch stages between there. I have a Slack, which is my code editor, and Slack, and a couple of other tools that are on the right-hand side. It's a great way to switch between applications and switch your displays around. This also works in the touch interface on iPadOS, and I'm excited to play with that. I haven't played with that at all on iPadOS because I haven't had an iPad that supports it. My iPads are a little bit on the older side, and so this feature does not come into all iPads that support iPadOS 16 as of this moment. So we'll have more about that in the coming weeks.
Cool, things to look forward to. I'm off screen again. Sorry.
Maybe you need Stage Manager, man.
Yeah, I probably do.
Did I hear you correctly, Tom, that you are presenting this webinar from beta software?
I have been running the macOS 13 beta since July on my daily driver. Don't tell my IT
daily
guy.
driver.
I certainly didn't say this on a recorded webinar where he could watch it later.
No. All right, rapid security response.
You hear me get excited about a lot of these features. This one makes the IT guy in me
3 minutes.
Okay, super excited. Apple has, for a long time, you've had to wait and restart to achieve security with a given version of macOS. If you want to go from 12.5.1 to 12.6 or 12.6 to a future version of macOS 12, it's a full restart process. You download the Delta update, you apply the Delta update, you switch the boot volume. There's a whole bunch of processes that happen. You wait like 20 minutes. That's not awesome. There are parts of the operating system that Apple can now update on the fly without the user's participation. And this is something that we're going to watch and see what Apple's cadence of releasing RSR updates is and where they're going to be updating the operating system. I'm going to be very, very curious to see how this goes, if only because it takes some of the control out of the admin's hands. And as an admin, you have the ability to essentially say, thank you, but I'm in charge of updates. And you can definitely say no to RSR as an admin. There's a configuration profile that's documented in Apple's developer documentation on how to do that. And so if you really, really want to do that, you can. I don't necessarily think that's a great idea. So let's wait and see how this goes. I'm very curious to see how this goes, but I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, I put this into the same bucket as the XProtect and the malware removal tool kind of stuff. It doesn't have a UI element. It sits under the surface and is just waiting for the trigger from Apple to remove some 0-day or some kind of unpleasantness that they don't want that 24 hours, 48 hours, 2 weeks turnaround time for people that just never reboot their machines.
That's exactly right.
I think the removal tool, pulling out things like, if there's a rootkit in, say, a screen sharing app, being able to do that, or being able to patch the OS when they see that, oh, there is a rootkit in this popular screen sharing app and it's utilizing some hole or some vulnerability, we can just go ahead and patch that and not have to worry about removing or redacting something that is already out in the world that we don't necessarily control and get in trouble for that. They can do a really quick 0-day or -1 day even patch if they see something that's that hasn't been patched already.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got a quick poll for you. It should be in your chat. Is that correct? Oh, there we
Pops
go.
up on the screen.
Would you like to talk to your account manager or a directory solutions advisor? We're going to let you
This is a
answer
great
that
way
question.
to, find out what's happening with JumpCloud. If you're not a JumpCloud customer, to learn a little bit about what we do. And we're more than happy to talk with those folks, on a regular basis. If you're a customer, we definitely want your feedback. If you're new to JumpCloud or interested in JumpCloud, we'd love to talk with you about what you need as a business. I promise this isn't going to be a painful sales call. I really promise that. I say that as someone who used to avoid those like the plague. So, definitely consider it. We'd appreciate it.
Okay, you guys are still voting. How about while they're voting, why don't I throw one of the questions at you guys?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Let's do it.
Cool. Will the new macOS Ventura integrate better with Microsoft Endpoint Manager? We have a small team of developers using MacBooks per requirement, but we need to meet regulatory compliance with CMMC and ISO 27001. And so far, having to use a Mac prevents us from reaching 100% compliance due to the incompatibilities with Endpoint Manager. What say you?
macOS definitely has, excuse me, the Microsoft Endpoint Manager, also known as Intune. So for those of you not familiar with the product here, there are a lot of feature changes that have been brought to that. If you haven't watched last week's Ignite sessions on Endpoint Manager, I would strongly recommend you go seek those out. They are constantly providing new versions of their platform software here, much the same as we are here at JumpCloud. So definitely encourage you, if there's parts of CMMC and ISO 27001 that Endpoint Manager can't help you meet, definitely start to figure out what those are, and maybe other solutions, including JumpCloud, for example, which can provide multi-factor login or multi-factor authentication at the login window. That's a CMMC, I believe, level 3 requirement at this point, or is that on? It's level 2 on the new scale. But there's a lot of things that we can do that maybe Endpoint Manager can't.
I think you
I
can
would
probably have a
mention
further conversation about that, Tom, if they want us to.
Yeah, happy to jump on the
If
community.
they said yes on that poll.
Yeah, I was gonna say happy to talk on the community, community.jumpcloud.com, or in the JumpCloud Lounge Slack.
I would use this opportunity to mention the macOS Security Compliance Project. Any questions about compliance with security standards? They're all US based at the moment because it's coming from the NIST and others. But the compliance with a variety of different security protocols and ISOs and all that you can do through profiles with certain settings, and you can audit the Macs with the scripts that are there in the macOS Security Compliance project on GitHub. And I put a link in our chat. I'm not sure if it can go out to the audience. So
yeah, I was going to say the macOS Security and Compliance Project is fantastic. If you're not familiar with it, please go check it out. There is a branch of it for Ventura. So they are ready, obviously ahead of the macOS release. So, that's a fantastic way to say
it. So Tom, is there, we have another question here. Wait, I lost it. Will upgrading to Ventura affect current MDM setups?
It should not. Your MDM is set up, should handle an update to macOS Ventura. JumpCloud's ready. Obviously, we've got some profiles that are going to go out on day 0 when those go out to provide some additional functionality. And for folks using JumpCloud that maybe want to allow list JumpCloud's agents in new ways, there will be documentation on our knowledge base. We will also have some posts going up on the community on Monday. So look for more from us next week.
Excellent. I want to make mention, speaking of the community, you have the URL for the community down at the bottom of the slide. Dora's also going to put a link to our mental health webinar that's coming up. Last year's was ridiculously good. I would encourage you to go to that one and pay attention there. We have phenomenal speakers.
Yeah, and it's a really important topic. As somebody who's had mental health challenges in IT before, it's stigmatized, and it shouldn't be. This is a hard job, and there's a lot of stress that comes along with this job. I really encourage folks to come out for that webinar. It's going to have a lot of great advice as well as real talk about what the stresses of the job are and how to talk about it. So it's November 3rd at noon, and noon Eastern, so 9 Pacific, 10 Mountain. That's also 5 p.m. for our British visitors, 6 p.m. for our EU staff, and if memory serves, that's something around 2 in the morning for our Australian crowd. Sorry, everybody.
So convenient, but it'll be recorded. It'll be recorded. Yes. So if you don't want to hit 2 in the morning, we hear you. Let's do our next question. Lockdown mode. Could this be an issue for us if a device is in lockdown mode and we need to add a secondary profile due to corrupt profile because managed M1, M2 MacBook Pro user is maybe unable to log in?
The profiles that we're talking about here are configuration profiles. They're not user logins. And so lockdown mode should not, at least in our testing, cause a problem with adding new users to a JumpCloud device.
Great. So without patch management, without JumpCloud patch management specifically, can Ventura be delayed for more than 90 days, preferably indefinitely by using the macOS installer?
Here is what I can say today, which is there are 2 policies available. There is a delay macOS major upgrade policy, which will help with Ventura. There are some things you should pay attention to next week around this. That will delay macOS Ventura for up to 90 days. The block macOS Ventura installer app policy will only work on downloaded installer app based installations of macOS Ventura. We'll have a lot more to say about other ways to update to Ventura next week after the release of the operating system.
So tied onto that, the next question it expands it by asking if I wanted to verify if we had a date where I should prepare to be fully able to roll out the OS.
So macOS Ventura comes out on Monday. It's Monday, October 24th, probably around 1 p.m. Eastern is when we usually start to see those updates. Might be earlier, might be later, don't know yet, we'll see. But I think that, that's really important for you to be aware of. The second half of that question is, do we know how things are going to work out with the known upgrade bug for 12.6.0 devices showing the major update is a minor one? Pay more attention on Monday. Come talk to me individually. I strongly encourage folks who are part of the Appleseed for IT program to review the Appleseed documentation at this time. Or come find me in Mac Admin Slack in the Appleseed-private channel. If you don't have membership there, you can join the Appleseed channel on the Mac Admin Slack and prove that you're a member of Appleseed for IT. I strongly encourage folks to handle that. Sorry, everybody.
And Appleseed, just to clarify, you need a managed Apple ID. You don't necessarily need to have a developer, an Apple developer ID.
That's correct.
For the developer betas and things for a long time, you had to have a developer ID just to even access them.
Right.
That hasn't been true for a while. Now you have more access to that sort of thing.
Right. So Tom, we have a question about future minor updates. And their arrival.
Okay.
They want to know what
I can short circuit that and basically say, here at JumpCloud, we understand that there are some issues that may be corrected in future minor releases of the operating system. Those releases are not currently available. I don't have a formal timeline. Apple does not publish formal timelines for the release of patch updates, and they really haven't announced the existence of any future security updates. I know that this is not what admins like to hear, but the situation that we're dealing with right now is that I think you are safe to assume that delaying major updates of the operating system is the best way to delay macOS Ventura. For now, we will have more to say next week, but it is safe to say that all versions of macOS 12 will see macOS Ventura as a major upgrade as of this moment. You can use the major OS version upgrade delay policy as well as our patch policies, as well as the block macOS Ventura app policy to delay macOS Ventura if you need to delay it on day 0.
And I would suggest that if it drops at 1 p.m. on Monday, you will see requests from users right about 1:01 p.m. on Monday.
Correct.
That long?
Can I install this? When can I install this? I want to install this. So go ahead and put those policies in today, or between now and Monday. Make sure that the the policy, whichever way you decide to go, is in place now, so that come Monday afternoon, you're not scrambling to close the barn door after the horses have gotten out. Is that
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Awesome advice.
We have more questions. We don't have more time. I can assure you that all of your questions will get answered. And so after the webinar, expect to hear from somebody from JumpCloud with answers to your questions.
Absolutely. Once again, community.jumpcloud.com is where we all hang. Webinar November 3rd. And I want to thank you, Charles, for spending your morning with us. Tom, as always, thank you for being the beacon of Mac font of knowledge here.
Thank you so much, Pam.
Appreciate it. Take care, all.
A suitcase of fonts of knowledge. Thank you, Tom. And
Yes.
thank you, Pam.
Thanks, everybody.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.